Hello and welcome, Jules Buono, to the Wild Wonder podcast.
Hi.
Hi, so your full name is Julianne Boncore, am I right?
In Italy, that's
In
exactly
Italy?
how they say it. We say it in English, in America, more like Bunicore.
Unicorn.
Yeah,
Oh, cool. Well, Boncore is good heart, so what a
it
fantastic name
is.
to
And
have.
funny story about that, because this is my husband's last name, and his
Hmm.
father is a heart doctor.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. It couldn't be better marketing for a heart
I
doctor.
know.
It's meant to be. Well, you are a full-time blogger now, but you weren't always. From what I remember, you were an attorney before. It seems
I
like
was an
quite the
attorney
leap,
before.
right?
It is quite the leap, and a good one though.
Hmm. So you went from blogging on the side while you were an attorney, or did you? Yeah.
Yes, I did it on the side starting in 2019 after our honeymoon and wedding. When I really needed that creative outlet that you kind of get during the wedding process.
Yeah. So you were feeling creative while you were planning your wedding, and then you felt like you were missing that after, and it's just
Yes,
kind of an
that
outlet for
and
writing.
the fact that we had learned so much and had so many notes from our wedding and our honeymoon in particular. We did go to Italy, and it was my first time out of the country, and it was our first time, on a really big trip together.
Hmm.
I had spent so much time. As an attorney, what we do is research. So
Right.
there were no stones unturned in the research of this trip. And the way I had kind of done it was kind of how I live my life on a daily basis, which is I read all of these books that pertain to a topic, and then I live the life pertaining to that topic. And so I noticed when we came back, I had all these lists of books from every city, and then I also had our list that we made this list ahead of time, and then we went on the trip, and then we were kind
Hmm.
of editing the list as we went on. Like, what would we tell other people when we came back that this is a must, this is not a must, or take this off, put this on, note to
Hmm.
get this at this restaurant. And I kind of had those both worlds when I came back, where it's the books and the lifestyle. And I realized that's kind of how I am in my life,
Hmm.
and thus began the literary lifestyle.
But you had no, when you brought these notes and these books home, you were thinking, I want to share this information with my friends, or you immediately thought, I want to share this information with a wider audience?
A little bit of both. I think, the first thing you think of is sharing it with your friends, that those are the
Hmm.
people who, you go on Facebook and they say, I'm going to Italy. What do you
Hmm.
recommend? Or I'm looking for a new thriller. What do you recommend? You think of it that way. But my husband and I also had a lot of background he owned an e-commerce business for many years, and I served
Okay.
as his attorney and learned a lot about the internet digital space and all those things during that time period. And I really dug deep. And I had also been journaling and blogging privately my entire adult life, and in written journals before
Hmm.
then. So it kind of just all came together at once.
So when you started blogging, it was essentially travel books, or you were looking at fictional books as well?
No, fictional books, because that's kind of
Okay.
what I would, and travel books actually,
Okay.
because I did it all. So like I like to kind of uncover everything when I
Hmm.
do something, and most of the time it's through books. So I would have this list of fictional books in each city, but then I would also be reading the travel guides. And it wasn't just travel that I had in mind, but that was sort of the impetus. Like, if a book has a recipe, I'm making that recipe.
Right.
Or if I'm really inspired by all the songs mentioned in a book, I'm making a Spotify playlist. So it
Yeah.
kind of started with the travel, but I knew I had all these other elements of lifestyle I could bring into it.
I love that because I love myself a theme. Like I love to immerse myself in like fictional books. If I'm going to a specific place, I'm reading the fictional books about that place. I'm trying to like eat the food from there even before I get there and listen to the music. So I like to just like immerse myself in that vibe.
That's exactly me.
Yeah. So because when I first heard of you, it was kind of serendipitous because I first heard about the Rory Gilmore reading challenge. Just I Googled it. I want to say it's been in the like stratosphere for a while, right? And I was like, wow, I wonder. I'm always looking for a good like reading challenge immersion, and I came across your list, and that's how you first came into my little world, and then you were on the SSR podcast.
Oh, good. So you listen to SSR as well.
I do. I love it. I love
Yeah,
all those
Allie
like.
is fantastic. I think she's the perfect person to be talking about children's books that we read and loved as kids and teens, but from an
Hmm.
adult perspective. It's totally her
Absolutely.
niche.
She totally got me reading all those books again now as an adult, and some of which you're like, should I have been reading this as a child? And
And
others
looking
it
at them
just
with
brings
new
you right back.
perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm curious to know what about that whole Rory Gilmore world drew you in?
So I have an interesting story with Rory Gilmore and the Gilmore Girls as well. My sister was the one who was a super fan back in the early 2000s, and it was
Mm-hmm.
to the point where she had it on 24 hours a day, whether or not she was in the room, outside of the room. She just wanted it to always be on. And I thought it was insane that my parents allowed their, teenage daughter to be
Mm.
playing the TV even when she wasn't there. So by osmosis, I started taking in all of these episodes. And then you kind of get drawn into it at the same time. There's all these, funny things that we would talk about, like I got hit by a deer, that, funny line and episode. And we loved Lane's mom.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many things that we would talk about then. And then, kind of forgot about Gilmore Girls as life went on and the show ended and I went off to law school. And when the pandemic started, like everyone was, I was looking for something to binge watch
Right.
and, a comforting binge watch, which is what we all craved during that
Mm-hmm.
time. And I was also thinking about, it was right when fall started, and I was also thinking about what do I want my next year reading list to look like? And I had been disappointed with all of these, more modern books that I was getting sucked in with all this hype. And I was thinking, there's all
Mm-hmm.
these books from the past, whether they're classics or even more modern classics that I either didn't have time to read or wasn't old enough to read, but I
Mm-hmm.
really want to dive into. And those two things kind of happened right at the same time too. I thought, well, it's fall. I haven't really watched Gilmore Girls since 20 years ago. And then as I was doing this, I was thinking, wait, this reading challenge has everything on it. It has the classics, it has the more modern books, it has all the pop culture, and it just seems like the perfect combination. And it also matches with the theme of the blog, which is pairing literature with life. And
Right.
I'm not surprised that that's how you found the blog because I think that's how most people find it. And the
Mm-hmm.
passion of Gilmore Girls fans and Gilmore Girls fans who love to read blows my mind on a daily basis.
It is. It's a funny connection there, and I actually didn't start watching the Gilmore Girls until I became a parent. I didn't really connect with it when it was out in the early 2000s. I didn't get it. And then when you're older, I think I started to really appreciate that not only the mother-daughter connection, but the value of female friendship and that storyline. And that's what drew me in.
You gotta love that friendship between
Hmm.
Sookie and Lorelai.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when I was looking for book lists to read, because I need direction in my reading sometimes, I tend to like want to read everything and then I feel overwhelmed because my TBR pile is falling over. I was like,
Right.
yeah, I'll download the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge. And at the same time, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of books.
It is, but that's okay. It
Yeah,
just means we have lots of years to complete them.
yeah. But just like that reading challenge and your subscription newsletter, which I love, you describe it as kind of a cozy corner where you could read a book and have a coffee. And I just want to say that's exactly what it feels like when I get it in my inbox.
I couldn't be happier to hear that. That's honestly the best thing I could ever hear.
It does. It gives me that same feeling of Gilmore Girls because when you sit down, you just want to be comforted. You want to be in a blanket in the fall watching something that's going to make you feel good.
Yes, that's exactly my dream life.
Yeah. Right. And at least for me, sitting at my computer, I spend my days writing, and when I see your like little alert of your email, I always take a break. It's almost like somebody brought me my little cafecito, and it's time to like calm down and read your newsletter and then go back to work. So it
There's
served as
something
my
so
little break.
special about newsletters, and they do, sometimes I think, well, how, is this different than being on social media? But it really is. Like, there's something that is more journalistic about it. Like, I do it
Hmm.
2 times a week now, and it's a little bit different. But when I was doing it 1 time a week, it truly felt like I was sitting down to journal for an hour about what
Yeah.
happened in my week, what happened on the blog, what happened in the world of reading. And it really was like therapeutic. And I can only hope that people feel that way when they get it too. And I try to make
Yeah.
it, helpful and light and easy to scan, easy to read, all those things, while also being, authentic and helpful.
Yeah, it does come across. I think I get all those things from it. I do write a newsletter every week, and I like hope it comes across in that way, that it's just like to check in and in a more intimate way than one would on social media.
And it's hard
Like you were
because you
writing to a
don't get as
friend.
much feedback as you do on
Right.
social media. So I
Yeah.
do get responses from people, but there's so much fewer and far between than you would on social media. So it's sort of like something that you put into the world and just hope it's being received
Yeah,
in a certain way.
totally. But it only takes that like one email back and you're like, oh my goodness, somebody's reading and they like
Yeah, yeah.
it. But I mean, I think it's amazing. Now you're up to 300,000 readers.
Yeah, this month we should hit 300,000 per month.
Wow. Wow. How did that look like for you from the day you decided like this is a thing that I'm gonna do regularly to like now we're having almost 300,000 readers?
It's kind of like slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
You really do. And I love going back every month. I keep statistics every single month.
Mm.
And sometimes you don't feel a change or, you're sort of going about your daily life. But when you go back and look even just 3 months ago or 5 months ago or 1 year ago at this time, you really see that steady, slow and steady climb.
Hmm.
And you start realizing like, oh yes, this daily work is paying off slowly but surely.
That's a good point because you could totally miss it when you're in it, right?
Yes.
So you're saying you go back every month to kind of review what's happened over the last month?
Yeah, every first of the month, I kind of regroup on everything that happened in the past month and what the best was and what the worst was and what I can improve on and what if people are really liking something, then I
Mhm.
want to be able to put that out there maybe in the newsletter again and let people know this is something everyone is really liking, or maybe I can add something to that, like a
Mhm.
video or something to make it more hands-on. And that's kind of when I go back then and see all the stats from the prior months and prior years. And that's really when you get that you can physically see those numbers and how they've changed over time.
Would you say you're naturally inclined to do that, or did you have to build that ritual for yourself?
I think I'm naturally inclined to do that. I would say I'm kind of a data nerd. I'm not a
Oh yeah.
numbers nerd at all, and that is without a doubt. As a writer and as a reader, I always
Yeah.
say like what you're really good at, you struggle with the opposite. So being really good
Hmm.
with words, I'm not as good with numbers, but I'm really into data and analysis, and I think that comes from a legal and writing background as well.
What would you say to someone that doesn't have that background, that wants to build something, whether it be a blog or a business? Do you know how they might build that ritual for themselves if they're not inclined to like data and analysis?
So I think if you're starting, I think it depends on what kind of business you're starting. It might be a cake business or it might be art or an Etsy shop or a blog, and they're all very different. But I think being a self-starter is really important because most people, it probably isn't their full-time job to start off with. They
Mm-hmm.
probably are in something else right now, and you're not necessarily going to go back to college. It's about listening to podcasts, reading books, diving into blogs, newsletters, everything you can, and being that person who can sit down and figure it out. I think
Hmm.
is the number one step. No matter what it is, even so many creators are trying to learn video now. And it
Right.
really is going back to that square one of, it took us all these years to learn writing and photography. Now we have to go back and like, I started a master class today on video.
Hmm. Right.
To really go back to those bare basics. And, if I've done it before, I can do it again. And it really is just challenging yourself to new and different things every day and trusting that you can do it.
Hmm.
And fighting through all those moments of overwhelm or burnout because it
Hmm.
really is. And I think it's important to say something like this that, I didn't take any money from my business for over 2 years.
Yeah.
So from my side business. So this is
Hmm.
something I was working on. Maybe the first year I probably didn't make much at all. It was probably mostly expenses and investments. And then the second year I was making money, but I wasn't taking money from it or spending. And those are really hard things to do.
Right.
You really do have to trust this long-term process. Like I like to compare it to a marathon where it's like, every day you're getting up and you're training, and then maybe you're researching sneakers or, all these different things. And then maybe months or even years from when you started, you cross that finish line.
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to come to terms with, especially when you're not seeing money come in. I hear this from
Right.
a lot of creators, like, oh, but can I really spend 3, 4 hours a day doing this thing when no money's come in? How do I rationalize that for myself, for my business, for my
Exactly.
family?
And rationalize it to your family as well.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I had this confidence that, came from within me that I knew I could do it. But it's also hard. And I can see where, if my husband was doing something 3 or 4 hours a day, and for a year or 2 years, we weren't really seeing anything come from it, I'd be thinking, well, what is he doing this for?
Yeah.
Whereas in my mind, I had done all the research and I kind of knew. I'd heard all these other stories and what to expect and when things sort of take off and what to focus on and all that. So I sort of knew that, it was this long-term game, but I think
Hmm.
it's really hard when you're in it, and it's hard to explain to people around you as well.
Hmm. Did you have to have that conversation with your husband or someone in your family? Like, here's what I want to
I
do.
did. I think it was hard for my husband the first year because, I would get excited saying, oh, 20 cents came in, or, oh, I sold one book and I got $1. And I'd
Hmm.
be so excited. And he'd think, well, I haven't seen you for the past month. So
Right.
was that $1 worth it? Um, but once the money started coming in and once I started going over the numbers with him every single month, and also him
Hmm.
being a businessman, and understanding what it was like, and like he didn't take money from his business the first 2 years either.
Okay.
He had to have another thing that was going,
Hmm.
in order to keep him, just paying his bills. So he knew
Right.
that there is this process. And I think most business owners will tell you that you don't see a profit in the first year and you don't take money in the first year. And it really is hard in many, many ways to get through those stages because not only are you not making money, but you're really overwhelmed and you're really burned
Hmm.
out and you don't know, is this going to be worth it someday?
Yeah, and sometimes you're so inundated, I'll speak for myself, so inundated in the day to day of what you got to do just to keep things moving, to keep the train on the track, that you can't even see ahead a foot or two.
Right.
Unless, like you say, you step back and you look at the month prior and you do it
Right.
again the following month.
And hear other people's stories and try to follow that trajectory of the people
Mm,
who are in that field and have success. What did
yeah.
they go through that got them to that point? What noise did they not listen to? What were, I'm really focused on money making tasks, and I think that's important as well. There's so much noise, no matter
Hmm.
what business you're starting, to really focus on those things that are going to make you money, as opposed
Right.
to, the 10,000 social media platforms and
Yeah.
all these other things that are out there.
Yeah, you seem to be very disciplined about that, and I don't know if that's because you kind of don't like social media as much as blogging, or you made a decision like this is what works, and so therefore I'm going to do the blogging and I'll do social media when I want or feel like.
It's a little bit of both. I enjoy social media more as a consumer.
Hmm.
Like I love to go and chat in the DMs with people and just make friends.
Right.
But being introverted and a writer and more creative,
Hmm.
my process is better in the writing sphere. And then, like you said, since that is my money making task, and I've learned how to make that my money making task, then the
Hmm.
social media does come second. For someone else, they might be fantastic at stories, and that
Right.
might be their money making task, and then the blog might come second.
How does that look for you in terms of like mental health, this decision to just follow the one thing versus following the next big thing?
I can honestly say I've never been happier. I feel like everything has finally come together for me. I've never been happier to sit down and work. And, there's been nights where, I'm on my phone looking at someone's story who's in another part of the world where it's the next morning and
Hmm.
thinking, I wish it was morning for me too, so I could get back to this. And there's no better feeling in the world
Yeah,
when you're
no.
working than that. But at the same time, there's always the temptation to keep working. And there's
Hmm.
always this pressure that, a digital space is something where there's tons of people doing it. And how do you stay ahead? You want to,
Right.
you just want to keep hustling and grow your business, but at the same time, your mental and your physical health is so important. And that has been something that's been hard for me in those first few months. And I
Hmm.
think really just even this week and the past few weeks, I'm really trying to figure out those balances where
Hmm.
I won't allow myself to pick up the computer until I've done some healthy things for myself in the morning.
Right.
Because as soon as I get up, my brain's wired and working and ready to go and wanting to start. And then I can get sucked into that computer world where then I don't get up until dinner time, and then I don't want to, work out or eat healthy at that time. I just want to throw a pizza in the
Yeah.
oven.
Yeah.
So I have been trying to balance those things, especially just in the past few weeks. And my husband's been really helpful with that as well. Like, I'm someone who loves a to-do list and loves crossing off a to-do
Hmm.
list. And that also keeps me at my computer. And he's got me to understand that a to-do list is not a list, it's a circle that never ends. So, you really have to make those
Yeah.
boundaries on those hours, because it's not like you're ever going to get to a point where that list is empty, and now is the time where you take care of yourself. And if you don't take care of yourself, you're never going to get to that point anyway. You're just going
Right.
to burn out.
Right. And it could be so addictive, that to-do list. Like, I know that I could keep going.
Yes.
Once I got three down, I was like, oh, I could do four, five, six. Oh, I
Yes,
still
I'll
have
feel
30
so much
minutes. I could do
better
more.
when I get this off my list.
Yeah.
And then you
But
just add something else on there.
right, exactly. Or I'm like, oh, I could do Friday's to-do list too. That happened to me yesterday. I'm like, why am I doing this? The whole
Right.
point was to like be able to have a break.
Yes.
But the reason I started this podcast back in 2020 during the pandemic was to be able to share some of these tools for self-care and self-love, some of these rituals. I would love to know how you build those into your day. If you have go-to like self-care rituals, or do you just give yourself the space to kind of see what you need?
So right now, I'm trying to build in this, I'm calling it my power hour in the
Okay.
morning, where I want at least 1 hour that feels powerful. And it could
Mm-hmm.
be drinking green juice. It can be standing while I'm working instead of sitting. It can be doing a workout, walking to the post office. I just want to have this like 1 hour where I feel good that 1 hour of my day was spent physically, mentally very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then to do my work day. After the work day, my number one top self-care is I take a bath almost every single night. And I've been like this
Oh,
since I
wow.
was a child. My mom still jokes that every time she calls me, she says, "Oh, are you getting on?" I always say, "Oh, I'm just getting out of the bath. I'm just getting out of the bath," because that is I love the heat. I love the warmth and comfort of the water. And then my last hour before bed is reading. So that's sort of my wind down time as well.
Mine too, and that leads perfectly into I wanted to ask how books play a role in this idea of self-care and self-love.
I honestly think it's such a great form of self-love and self-care, because not only can you educate yourself, you can improve your communication, you can be a better networker, you can just escape to a different world, whether it's Harry Potter or, I mean, that's such an escape for people, and me too.
Mm.
And so many books can be, whether, it's cold and you're reading a book set at the beach.
Mm.
There's just so many ways that it can be self-care and self-improvement.
Do you have any rules for nighttime reading? Because I know there's certain books that I won't read, and it's not the obvious. Like I do read horror at night, but I won't read like certain nonfiction. Do you have any rules like that?
Not really,
No.
and I think I'm different than the normal person, because a lot of my reading is based on what's going on with the Rory Gilmore Book Club or what's going on the blog. So it's sort of like a mix of work and self-care at the same time,
Hmm.
where, for this month for the Rory Gilmore Book Club, I was reading Shakespeare. So that wouldn't normally be
Yeah.
something I would like love to read before bedtime, but that's what was on my challenge for this month. So
Yeah, because I read your post. So you're not only are you reading Shakespeare, but you're reading the notes on what you're reading, and sometimes
yeah,
you
and
even
I
have to
find
go
that to be
online.
really helpful.
Yeah.
And this month we're reading a challenging book, and that's one of the ways I get through challenging books. And I think some people think there's a stigma to that, and I couldn't disagree more. I don't see any point in reading something, we shouldn't have to understand Shakespeare. It was written at a different time
Right.
with a different type of language. Like to me, it's almost like I don't understand 20-year-olds when they speak right now. They speak a different language than me as someone who's twice their age.
Hmm.
And it's sort of like that, I don't necessarily have to understand this. So why not have, and you appreciate it so much more when you get that context that's more modern.
Yeah, from that viewpoint, is there value to kind of tackling these harder books?
Oh, I definitely think so. And I think the Shakespeare one was the perfect example of that for me because I feel like it's something I read Macbeth, and I feel like it's something I'm going to think about and compare for years to come. I read the book, I read the notes, I watched the movie, and then I also I wrote a bunch of posts about different quotes from
Mm.
Macbeth, and I learned how those quotes have impacted so many other works.
Mm.
Um, like the book Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I
Right.
read
I love
last
that
year
one.
for the Rory Gilmore Book Club. And I
Mm.
learned that that title came from Shakespeare. And one of the
I didn't
new,
even make
most
that
popular
connection.
books I'm reading now, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow,
Mm.
is very heavily influenced by Shakespeare. And I'm almost done with it now, but it's about video games, and they're kind of basing it off of the play and talking about it, and the title comes from it, and to understand all those things and why they were important then and how they relate to this new story now,
Mm.
I couldn't take more value from it.
I hadn't made any of those connections, but now I want to read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow even more. It's definitely on my TBR.
Right. Yeah, it's
But yeah,
definitely the hottest book right now.
yeah, I think it's interesting how not only does fiction allow you to jump back in time, but it also allows you to put yourself in the place of another. Is there a book that you read that allowed you to see the world completely differently just because the character or narrator was so different than your culture or how you grew up?
So there's two that really come to mind with that question, and one is general and one is specific. The first one I think about, and I like this comparison because I think it can relate to so many situations in life. It's a really, really popular book called A Man Called Uva
Oh, yeah.
by Frederick Bachman. I don't know
Hmm.
if you've read it, but there's a movie that is, I guess it's Swedish, but they have
Hmm.
subtitles. Um, but it's this man who appears to be a grumpy old man on the outside.
Hmm.
And as the story goes on, and he meets this, new neighbor who's a younger woman and mother, you learn that the reason has this grumpy exterior is because of how much pain he feels inside from, without giving away too much, just different things that have happened in his life. And I think that's what reading does in so many contexts, and allows us to take that to everyday life, that what we see on the outside may not be what's on the inside.
Right.
And then the second thing that I really think of is anytime I've read an Asian American book, and I dove deep on these a year or two ago for a blog post of
Mm-hmm.
a list of the same topic, and I really read a lot, and I realized that while there's not one in particular, reading this group as a whole, I learned that there were so many things about the Asian American experience that I had no idea that this is what people were experiencing, or this is what it was like for them to be in those shoes. If only one book would come to mind, I would say The Joy Luck Club, but really a lot of the books have, and that one's on the Rory Gilmore list
Mm-hmm.
as well. But all of the books have almost the same themes and the same, characterizations, and it totally opened my eyes. And for so many years and so many decades, we didn't see a lot of Asian American characters on film. So to be able to dive into their minds in books really offered this experience that I had no idea about.
Right. Yeah, I dove into a couple Asian American books. I want to say the one that really hit me was it called Free Lunch for Millionaires?
I haven't read that one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that of the whole immigrant experience and the difference between being a child like me, born in the United States, but being the only person of your family born in the United States, and how we as first generation Americans kind of all share that, regardless
Right.
of like what cultural backgrounds we come from.
Yeah, it's
So I
so
found that really
interesting.
enlightening. Yeah.
Really
And
insightful.
yeah. I think it builds up a person's compassion too. And if we pick an author from a background or culture in which we don't fully understand, I'm sure you agree, but I think it builds a compassion for that population of people as well as some compassion for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Or we see our shared humanity.
Yes. Yes. Common themes and seeing
Hmm.
beyond those exteriors.
Yes. Is
And
there a
also
particular?
learning motivations. I think whether it's even if you're just learning historical, whether you're reading, World War II or Civil War, when we grow up in school, we learn this war happened on this date and this, but you don't never really learn the whys and the
Yeah.
motivations or what caused that to happen or what was going on in society that made people think that way. And a book can really help you dive in on those levels as well.
Yeah, and also the philosophies that are prevalent, and even in terms of like different generations, how different generations can hold different values and philosophies on life that then therefore play out on the world stage that we born into our own little generation might not understand quite yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So were you always into books? Did it always take you across time and space?
Absolutely, it did. I can still remember to this day the first time I learned to read, the first little teeny tiny, it was like a little 3-inch book that I read, and it honestly felt like a superpower to me, and I never forgot that exact moment. I can still picture it
Mm.
in my mind, and I can still feel the excitement that I don't know why this felt like a superpower to me, but it felt like I could do anything once I learned how to read.
Right. And when you started reading, was there ever a character, either when you were a child or now, that you felt like, oh, I see myself in them, or this is me? Something, is that a character that you kind of carry with you to this day?
Yes, the character I identify the most with from my childhood was Molly McIntyre from The American Girls.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's always important to, especially for kids, to see themselves in a character, whether it's on TV or in a book or
Hmm.
video game, anywhere, or a doll. And, I always wore my hair in two long brown braids and I had round glasses. And that's exactly how Molly looked. And
Mm.
we wore similar clothes. And also her father was in World War II, and both of my grandfathers were in World War II. So I felt like I was able to learn about my historical background through
Hmm.
her, in addition to seeing someone who looked like me on the pages.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, it is so important for kids. I don't think enough kids see that nowadays. I'm grateful that now more authors are doing LGBTQ books in middle grade fiction. I think that's beautiful, and I can only imagine a child being like, "That's me. They're finally talking about me," you know?
Yes, and American Girl now allows you to customize.
Oh
When
yeah.
when it was my generation, it was 3 dolls, and luckily one of them, I identified with. But now you can totally customize everything from the hair to the eyes, skin, what they're wearing, and I definitely think that's so important.
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, there wasn't a Latin girl, so I wasn't into American Girl so much.
Yeah. See, and that kind of proves the point that you kind
Yeah.
of like you need that connection.
Yeah. Um, so now well, first, what book are you reading now?
Tomorrow and tomorrow and
Tomorrow,
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
And then at
And
night, since we talked about nighttime reading and kind of
mhm.
liking lighter reads at night, I picked up a bunch of Ellen Hildebrand books that I hadn't read yet because I've
Because
read
of you,
most
I
of her
just
more.
started one. I
Which
just finished
one?
one. 69, Summer of 69.
That's my favorite one.
Is
And that's
it?
another one where you get the historical context. I'm reading one of her older ones called Beautiful Day, and it's about a wedding in Nantucket. So, I love reading those at night because they're just, they're juicy and light and dramatic and on the beach. And this one has a wedding too, so that's a good nighttime
I
read. And
felt
it,
like culturally that one taught me a lot because
yeah,
since, I'm Cuban American, I mean, even though I was raised in the States, I didn't get the American experience fully because I was in Miami. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. The whole like 60s and what occurred before the 60s that led up to it and kind of the more personal feelings around that era.
Yeah, the era and that summer in particular, because there were so many momentous events. And then you also just always get a great family story.
Yeah, it was nice. But our book club, we focus on international fiction, usually translated fiction. And I know you love Elena Ferrante, which is one of my favorites. But you had one book in
Absolutely.
particular that you wanted to recommend?
Yeah, so I was first introduced to My Brilliant Friends by my sister-in-law when she heard we were going to Italy for our honeymoon. She said, "You have to read this book series." And the next day, the entire series showed up on my doorstep. She'd bought the whole series for
Oh,
me.
wow.
So, I'm sitting there with this stack of maybe like 2,000 pages, and it looks all really heavy and dry and small
Mm,
writing. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, like, should I do this? And will I like this? And it is, and we talked about going into other worlds. It's such an immersive world. It
mm,
really transports you into 1950s Naples, Italy. The storyline revolves around two young girls. It starts as young girls and then it goes throughout their life throughout the course of the four books. And it starts when they become friends, and they're in the slums of Naples, and they scratch the money together to buy Little Women, which is one of my all-time favorite books too. And one is naturally brilliant but very impulsive,
mm,
and the other one is not as naturally brilliant, but is very educated over time. So as they grow up, you see this difference of what occurs in their lives when one
mm,
is educated and one is not, in the same society. And it also draws in all of this whole cast of characters. It's a whole neighborhood where you learn all of these different families, and it's how they all relate to each other, how every family relates, how every marriage relates, and it all sort of comes together. And there's always also this push and pull dynamic between these two girls throughout their lifetime that
mm.
really sucks you in and keeps you asking for more and thinking, I can't believe she did this, and I can't believe this is where the story went. And just when you think it's going in one direction, it pulls in another, and it leaves you wondering which one is the brilliant friend.
Mm-hmm.
Is brilliance natural, or is it education? I hope I
And
did it some justice. If you want to
yeah,
add on
absolutely.
anything.
You just brought me back there. Those books, I have one left to read, the fourth one, because I can only read one a year because I feel like it's all consuming for me. It like takes over my life because I'm in that world and
Yes.
so involved with these characters as if they were really here and I had some vested interest in their lives.
Have you watched the HBO show?
I haven't. I'm waiting till I read the fourth one.
It's really, really good. It
Yeah.
is in subtitles, but I like that because it forces me to not pick up my phone or get
Yeah.
distracted in any way. And it just does such a beautiful job of recreating the story and the same pushes and pulls and
Hmm.
the same emotions. And it also, to me, it always helps to put faces to the characters as well, especially when there's a lot of them, which
It
there are
also
in this
it does a
series.
brilliant job of like weaving the historical through the narrative that you don't even realize that you're learning a lot of Italian history. Particularly, I think the third book that dives into like the student rebellions and all
Yes.
that.
That's when
I
it gets
thought.
into a lot of the more social issues.
Hmm. And also political and also like ideology. Just like with the first one, My Brilliant Friend, you jump in there thinking this is the character I'm gonna like. This character is right. This character is wrong. And then somewhere in the book, you're like, wait, you're flipped totally onto the other side. At least I was. Was there a character that in the first book, My Brilliant Friend, you really gravitated toward that felt more like you or you connected with her values?
That's pretty easy. You can probably tell just by looking at me sitting here with my books and my glasses that I was Elena, the bookworm, the one who was, reading every book, educated, taking every class. That was totally me. And she's also very quiet and polite, and more, I'm starting to think of the right word, but she hesitates more, whereas her friend Leela is one who's impulsive and acts and takes chances, and is more daring in life.
See, I felt like Leela was more me at that age, but I always wanted to be like Elena because she was able to like move through society, what seemed like to me easier than when you're
Yeah,
impulsive and constantly trying to push back on society as it is.
but at times you see Leela get those moments where you think,
Yeah.
oh, well, she's really made it now. And then
Mhm.
it flips and then it goes back again. And like you said, it weaves all of these different things into it
Yeah, if
at
we
the same
zoom out a
time.
little bit, I feel almost like it's the two like warring sides of any woman. It's like how do I lead a life within society as it is, and how do I force change or move toward change for something that I want or how I want the world to look.
And then we haven't even mentioned yet that there's also some pretty juicy love stories in this
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. That's true. I got really into it. Maybe this is a pandemic thing, but I got really into romance. And I know I mentioned it on the podcast before because I just wanted an escape. I
Right.
wanted every book to end with like, and they lived happily ever after, loved each other forever, the end.
Yeah, my brilliant friend is not like that. It's
Yeah.
very character driven. So I always like to give that kind of warning to people that if you're really wanting or you really only like plot driven, this
Mhm.
one's really a character analysis. But if you like character driven and you're willing to sit and like let something consume you,
Yeah.
then it's a good one to pick up.
And you have to be ready for it. Like I definitely time out reading these books when I don't have to do anything important.
Right. Yeah, you want to savor those words.
Yeah. Is there any other tips you have for people that want to read more or want to create this space for themselves where they can get really immersed in their books?
Yeah, so I like, I think you can set little goals for yourself, whether it's 5 pages a day or 5 minutes a day or 10 or 50, whatever you want, and start from there. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to carve out a whole afternoon if you don't have it. The other thing you can do is multitask or always have a book with you because there's all these little moments in life that, we don't think are going to happen where,
Hmm.
you're stuck in traffic or you're stuck in line somewhere. And it's the perfect time to then pull out a book or an audiobook and dive in. Or if you're going for a walk, pop them in. If you're doing laundry,
Mm.
pop your headphones in. There's ways you can do it that way as well. I think a reading challenge, like not to plug our Rory Gilmore reading
Yeah,
challenge
yeah,
too
no plug
too much,
away.
but a reading challenge can also really help you stay motivated. And for people who struggle with what to read, that's a good any reading challenge can
Hmm.
help you that way. You could read from different countries or different states, different authors, different genres. But if you like, a reading challenge can help you sort of frame what to read as well. Um, and then just like I said, carving out those little moments that you don't think you have, but everyone somehow does have.
Hmm. Instead of reaching for your phone, grabbing a
Yes,
book and really enjoying and luxuriating in the time that you do have.
right.
Because I think that's the other problem. Like, whereas before in the 80s, you could pull out a book and that's the only thing you could do, versus now we're gonna
Yes,
like, oh, I'm gonna do some more on my to-do list through my phone and check off all these things and read my
right.
emails.
I don't like to say multitask too much anymore because I feel like it
Mm,
promotes this hustle culture.
yeah.
But at the same time, for someone like me who would just be bored out of my mind cleaning, it almost helps me more to have an audiobook on at the same time. But if it's something that for you feels just like you're pushing yourself too hard
Mm,
to hustle or be overly productive, then maybe
mm,
that isn't the right step for you. And maybe you can just carve out a few minutes here or there or a few pages here or there, or just have the book with you so in your purse so that, when you're sitting at a doctor's office, you
yeah.
can pull it out.
Having the book with you or even a digital version of the book is so helpful. I've also found that like that happens with me in my journal. Like now that I carry my journal in my purse, now if instead of just like sitting and scrolling Instagram, I'll pull out my book or write in my journal for a little bit instead of getting consumed by my phone.
Right.
Yeah. So and not to mention it again, your emails are so wonderful and they definitely help me want to read more and more and more. So if you could please share with our audience how they can subscribe or get
Yeah, I
more.
definitely think subscribing via emails is the best way to follow the blog because you're going to get it only twice a week and you're definitely going to get it. Whereas social media, you may or may not see things. I don't always post things, but twice a week it's sort of a recap of the best of the week.
Hmm.
So you can go to theliterarylifestyle.com and just click subscribe. And there's a bunch of freebies that come along with it too. The one that people like the best is the Rory Gilmore book list PDF, which has over 500 books on it that were in some way referenced or seen on the Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, I have that one on my desktop. So I look at it all the time. I was like, oh, which one have I read now? So I love that. And I love getting your emails. They are like a cozy little treat during my day. So I want to thank you for that and for sharing your time and wisdom with our audience.
Thank you. I hope it helps.
Yes, of course. Thanks so much, Jules. I hope to see you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.